Hi there, I'm Professor Blackmore, and I want to welcome you to ProfessorBlackmore.com, where our goal is to empower results through real productivity. And if you haven't been here before, I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post new videos. And please also follow me on TikTok and Instagram. Well, today I want to review further details surrounding the Alec Baldwin Rust movie set shooting. And by way of brief background, as you know, the director of photography, Halyna Hutchins, was killed and director Joel Souza was injured when Alec Baldwin fired a gun on the set of the movie Rust, causing a live bullet projectile to strike Halyna Hutchins and to then enter the body of the director, Joel Souza, causing him to have serious gunshot injuries. And it seems like a new bombshell just drops in this case every week. Just recently, Alec Baldwin did a blockbuster interview, and I hope you'll review my video on my opinions and reflections to some of the outlandish things Alec Baldwin said in the interview. And if anybody was wondering what the sheriff thought about Alec Baldwin's remarks, well, he didn't keep us in the dark. The sheriff literally scoffed at Alec Baldwin's testimony that he did not pull the trigger on the gun. And I also got the feeling that the sheriff clearly didn't appreciate Alec Baldwin's unequivocal denial of criminal liability, because the sheriff has obtained a warrant seeking to seize Alec Baldwin's cell phone and all related data. And that leaves me with two questions right off the top. Number one, did the sheriff even ask Alec Baldwin for his cell phone, and he ultimately said no? And my second question is, does the sheriff really think he'll ever get his hands on Alec Baldwin's cell phone at this point in time, now that Alec Baldwin has an army brigade of attorneys representing him? Well, I actually have a copy of that search warrant, and I'm going to go over some of the interesting details that I found in it. And for one, the warrant itself answers the question of whether or not the sheriff asked Alec Baldwin for his phone. And right here in the actual warrant, the sheriff actually indicates that he requested Alec Baldwin's cell phone from Alec Baldwin and from his attorneys. And his attorneys indicated that if he wanted the cell phone, he was going to have to get a warrant. And as to the second question, in my opinion, I don't think the sheriff will win the battle of being able to actually obtain and seize Alec Baldwin's cell phone, as I am confident that his attorney's motion to quash the warrant is already ready to be filed with the court. And so let me break this down. Now, just because the judge signs a warrant doesn't mean the law enforcement official requesting the items to be seized will actually obtain them. And this is especially so when you're dealing with an out-of-state law enforcement agency. I believe Alec Baldwin resides in New York, and the New York law enforcement officials just do not have any jurisdiction or any authority to assist the New Mexico sheriff in executing this warrant. Now, let me give you an example of a similar warrant situation that was never executed. If you'll remember, the FBI was never able to get Apple to comply with the warrant to assist in accessing data on a cell phone that was owned by the San Bernardino Health Department, but was being used by one of the perpetrators in a terrorist attack, resulting in the mass shooting of over 14 people in San Bernardino, California. In the end, the FBI ended up having to pay an outside company approximately $1 million to help them to unlock that phone. But having a warrant did not help them one bit. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to get a lot of pushback from my followers here. But I actually think that the sheriff is not really looking for cell phone data. I think any communications that Alec Baldwin would have had on the phone, either verbal, text messages, or emails, can be obtained from whoever was on the other side of those communications. And I just don't think the sheriff is going to be SOL if he can't get Alec Baldwin's cell phone to obtain that information. For starters, the sheriff can get enough information from the cell phone records, which he can get from a warrant executed on the cell phone company itself. And so for this reason, I think there's a wholly different reason the sheriff wants the cell phone. Now, I know everybody is going to think I've lost my mind when I say this, but I actually think the sheriff thinks that Alec Baldwin and or his attorneys are stupid enough to not wipe the phone clean and that he'll leave fingerprints on the phone. I actually think that what's going on here is that Alec Baldwin's fingerprints are probably not in Codex, which is a fingerprint database used by law enforcement. But you kind of have to have a criminal background. What I actually think is going on here is that the sheriff may have a fingerprint, or maybe even a partial fingerprint from the trigger of the gun, and they maybe want to see if they can match the fingerprint to try to stymie Alec Baldwin's assertion that he did not pull the trigger on the gun. Now, not only did Alec Baldwin say he did not pull the trigger, but he also said his finger was not on the trigger. And I just think that the sheriff may be so incensed by some of the outlandish things that Alec Baldwin said during his interview that he may want to trip Alec Baldwin up just a little bit, or just to take a little bit of the air out of his confidence that he's not going to be criminally charged. And I just believe that while anything Alec Baldwin may have communicated on his phone can increase his civil exposure, I just don't believe that Alec Baldwin knew how live projectiles came to be on the set. And I just don't believe that he's involved in anything criminal that would be on his phone that would make anything he did criminal. Again, I still don't see anything at this point in time that leads me to believe that Alec Baldwin will be criminally charged in this case. Again, I do see that he has high civil exposure for liability, but I just don't see any criminal state of mind that will be able to substantiate bringing criminal charges against Alec Baldwin at this point in time. For there to be anything on Alec Baldwin's cell phone, he would have had to say clearly something that rises to the level of, I want to kill Helena, or something like, I am going to pretend to accidentally shoot her. It would have to be something so bizarre to rise to the level of criminality. Even as reckless as some of the actions have been described, they just don't rise to the level of the requisite culpable mental state that Alec Baldwin would need to have to be criminally charged in this matter. I still maintain that particular opinion. And so I believe the cell phone records from the cell phone company can give enough clues to get other warrants, to get any two-way communications that Alec Baldwin may have had, because I think a few other critical issues will preclude the sheriff from ever being able to get his hands on Alec Baldwin's cell phone. Knowing that Alec Baldwin was not a resident of Arizona, the sheriff should have obtained a warrant and gotten whatever he needed from the phone while Alec Baldwin was being interviewed right after the shooting occurred. But at this point, I think two huge issues stand in the way of the sheriff ever actually executing the warrant to actually obtain Alec Baldwin's cell phone. And the number one huge issue is probable cause. Probable cause is the main ingredient required by the Fourth Amendment, which governs searches and seizures. And quite frankly, you really need probable cause before the judge should sign the warrant. Now, obviously, the standard is pretty low because the judge signed the warrant, but clearly the sheriff does not know what the hell happened here. And even if you read the warrant, that becomes very clear. And while he may have enough probable cause to think a lot of people made a lot of mistakes, I don't see that he has enough probable cause to think that Alec Baldwin did anything criminal to cause those bullets to get on the set of the movie. And so my question is, did he get everybody's cell phone? Did he get the cell phone of the armorer? What about Dave Halls, who handed him the gun? Did he get everybody else's cell phone and cell phone data? Or is he just seeking Alec Baldwin's cell phone? And again, I just feel like if he actually needed that cell phone, he would have obtained it before Alec Baldwin's blockbuster interview with George Stephanopoulos. So, in addition to a lack of, in my opinion, probable cause, the other issue that stands in the way of the sheriff actually ever executing the warrant to actually ever obtain Alec Baldwin's cell phone is attorney-client privilege. I can see Alec Baldwin's brigade of attorneys making a lot of crafty arguments against turning over that cell phone. One huge problem at this point is that the device is used to communicate with his attorneys. As you know, when this all first happened, Alec Baldwin had no attorneys, but he has lawyered up at this point. And so he's using that cell phone to communicate in very highly confidential communications with his attorneys. So much so that I just don't see how you can untangle and separate some of the communications that are being made to the attorney. And this level of confidentiality is so sacred that I just don't see how the sheriff will be able to overcome it in the face of a lack of the level of probable cause that I think he just does not have. And if you read this warrant, there are a lot of interesting details in here as well. One of the things that I find interesting is the use of the term the period cult. I really do believe when it's all said and done that there's going to be some bootstrapping to some type of technical malfunction that the attorneys for Alec Baldwin are going to say occurred in that gun. I'm of the opinion that somehow having that hammer cocked back and then releasing it caused that gun to fire in some way, but I'm having a lot of pushback from that. From some of my followers here, they're letting me know, they're clapping back. They're saying that Alec Baldwin actually had to squeeze that trigger. I am only saying that I think that because of the type of gun that it was, this period cult, and the fact that I am being told that it was single action, that it takes just a slight amount of pressure on the trigger to cause that gun to fire. And I think the pulling back of that hammer in some way, shape, or form caused that trigger to move, causing the gun to fire. So I can see that the attorneys, in my opinion, are trying to create a malfunction scenario so that they can carry that along with the idea that Alec Baldwin didn't actually pull the trigger to make this look like some big malfunction that occurred in the gun. I believe that is one theory of their case for liability if it should ever get to that point in a civil case. And going along with that, I found a very interesting statement that was made by the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, where she tells the sheriff that she wasn't in there. So there's still this cloud around who actually handed that gun to Alec Baldwin. And she says they weren't even supposed to be pulling the hammer back. So I find that very interesting as well. Also very interesting is where she says when the last time she loaded the gun was, and she advised that she loaded the gun with 5 dummy rounds before lunch. She stated that there was one round that wouldn't go in. So after lunch, she took the cleaner and cleaned it out and put another round in. Those are very interesting details. And so there are just a lot of logistical and jurisdictional and just plain legal complications here that will make it very difficult, in my opinion, for the sheriff to actually ever execute this warrant and obtain Alec Baldwin's cell phone. But what do you think? If you do or don't think that the sheriff will get Alec Baldwin's cell phone, let me know in the comments section of this video. And even if you don't agree with me, if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a big thumbs up. And please also subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post new videos on this topic. And please also follow me on TikTok and Instagram.